Episode 6, The Little List and the Halloween Card. By the summer of 1970, the Zodiac Killer had already carved his name into California's darkest history. From lovers' lanes in Vallejo to the fog-draped streets of San Francisco, his crimes and taunting letters had left police scrambling, the public terrified, and newspapers under constant siege. But then something changed. The murders seemed to stop. No new bodies appeared along country roads. No bloodstained cab drivers were reported in the city. The killings that had defined his terror gave way to something different: words. The Zodiac began to transform from a prowler of the night into a manipulator of headlines. His weapon was no longer just a gun or knife. It was ink, paper, and the press. Police officials debated endlessly. Had the killer vanished, lying low to avoid capture? Or was he still watching, still plotting, but savoring the power of fear more than the act of murder itself? In Vallejo, detectives pored over stacks of letters. San Francisco journalists kept one eye on the newsroom doors, waiting for the next envelope with the crosshair symbol scrawled across the front. Every time one appeared, a shiver went down their spines. Was this merely the continuation of a macabre game, or the prelude to more bloodshed? For citizens across the Bay Area, life took on a strange, uneasy rhythm. Parents walked their children to school, scanning the streets. Couples hesitated before parking on darkened roads. Taxi drivers kept glancing into their mirrors, wondering if their next passenger might be their last. The Zodiac no longer needed to kill to keep his name alive. Fear itself had become his masterpiece. And in July 1970, that fear would reach a new crescendo when a letter arrived. One unlike any before, written not in blunt threats but in theatrical mockery, quoting verses from an old operetta. The stage was set. The Zodiac was about to unveil his little list. On July 24, 1970, the San Francisco Chronicle received another envelope marked with the now familiar crosshair symbol. Inside was a new letter from the Zodiac, but this one stood apart from the rest. It began not with cold statistics of death or veiled threats, but with a flourish of theatricality. The killer, ever the showman, quoted verses from Gilbert and Sullivan's operetta, The Mikado. He had borrowed from a song called A Little List, a satirical piece where characters recite all the people they'd like to see executed. The Zodiac twisted those lyrics into something darker, reshaping them to fit his own sadistic sense of humor. Some I shall tie over ant hills and watch them scream plus twitch and squirm. It was mocking, cruel, chilling, and it was unmistakably Zodiac. But this was no random bit of theater. The killer's choice of the Mikado carried meaning. The operetta's dark humor, mixing death with comedy, mirrored the Zodiac's own twisted game, murder and ridicule bound together, designed to horrify and entertain at the same time. Investigators stared at the letter in disbelief. Was this the writing of a madman? Or was it the work of someone intelligent, someone cultured enough to weave Victorian comic opera into the heart of a modern crime spree? The letter also contained something else, an update to his tally. At the bottom, the killer scribbled his grim scoreboard. 13 victims, 13 lives. Whether it was true or exaggerated, no one could be certain. But the message was clear. He wanted the world to believe his shadow stretched further than anyone imagined. The public's fear only deepened. Now the Zodiac wasn't just a killer. He was a performer, scripting his own play of terror and casting the people of California as his audience. The Little List letter confirmed what many detectives had begun to suspect. The Zodiac's murders might pause, but his thirst for attention never would. He didn't need fresh victims to keep his legend alive. The pen was just as sharp as his knife. On November 8, 1970, nearly 4 months after the Little List letter, the Zodiac struck again, this time with something unusual. An envelope arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside was a greeting card decorated with flowers and dripping red ink, giving the illusion of blood. Across the card, the words "Sorry I haven't written, but I just washed my pen" were scrawled in messy handwriting. The killer had chosen his card with deliberate irony. The phrase "dripping pen" took on a sinister meaning when paired with his reputation. For Zodiac, words could wound, taunts could bleed, and every card or letter was as sharp as a weapon. But inside the card was something even more alarming. Folded neatly within was a cipher, 340 characters long. This was no small puzzle. It became known as the Z340 cipher, and for decades it stood as one of the great unsolved mysteries of cryptography. The cipher was composed of strange symbols, repeating shapes, and cryptic markings arranged in 20 lines. Police and amateur codebreakers alike threw themselves at the challenge, but the solution remained elusive. For years, people wondered, was this the key to Zodiac's identity? A confession? A taunt? Adding to the mystery, the killer updated his tally again, signing off with his crosshair symbol and the chilling inscription. 14. Whether this meant another murder had been committed was uncertain, but it was consistent with his ongoing psychological war, to keep the public and the police guessing. The dripping pen card reinforced a terrifying truth. The Zodiac wasn't fading into the background. He was reinventing himself, staying relevant, and ensuring his legend grew with each cryptic word. The Chronicle published the card, and soon California was once again buzzing with theories. Some believed the cipher held the killer's name. Others thought it was nonsense, a cruel game designed to waste time and deepen the mystery. The truth wouldn't be known for another 50 years. But at that moment, in late 1970, the Zodiac once again had the upper hand. Just 2 days after the dripping pen card, on November 10, 1970, another letter surfaced. This time, it wasn't sent to San Francisco, but to the offices of the Los Angeles Times. It was the first clear sign that the Zodiac was expanding his stage. No longer content with tormenting just the Bay Area, he was now casting his shadow over Southern California. The letter, as usual, dripped with arrogance. The Zodiac opened by criticizing the San Francisco police, mocking their inability to solve his crimes. He wrote, "They just won't catch me because I have been too clever for them." This wasn't just bragging, it was strategy. Each time he taunted law enforcement, he undermined public confidence in the police, reinforcing the myth that he was untouchable. But what alarmed investigators most was the content of his new threats. In the Los Angeles letter, Zodiac hinted at future crimes, suggesting he might strike in Southern California next. He referenced the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, a young college student who had been killed in Riverside in 1966. Bates had been brutally attacked in a dark alley near her college library. Her killer disabled her car, lured her into isolation, and stabbed her repeatedly. The crime was unsolved, and police in Riverside had already received strange letters in the aftermath, possibly from the killer. Now, for years later, Zodiac was implying that he was responsible. He taunted investigators, writing that Bates was one of his victims, claiming ownership of a murder long thought to be unrelated. This claim threw detectives into turmoil. Had the Zodiac's murders stretched back earlier than anyone thought? Was Sherry Jo Bates truly his first victim? To this day, debate continues. Some experts believe the Riverside case matches Zodiac's methods. Others argue the handwriting in those 1966 letters doesn't match, suggesting Zodiac was simply trying to inflate his body count. Either way, the Los Angeles Times letter was a turning point. The Zodiac was no longer just a Bay Area menace. He was now suggesting a statewide reign of terror. His words weren't just crimes on paper, they were psychological warfare. And with each new letter, he controlled the narrative more than the police ever could. As 1970 drew toward its close, the Zodiac wasn't slowing down. If anything, his letters became stranger, more chaotic, more scattered, but no less chilling. On March 22, 1970, he had already shocked California with the abduction of Kathleen Johns. But the months that followed brought a series of letters and postcards that revealed a disturbing mix of cruelty, mockery, and even bizarre humor. The Pace card, March 1971, mailed late 1970. One of the strangest was a postcard mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle. It was a store-bought card advertising Pace brand laundry detergent, with the slogan, "Wash and wash and wash until it comes out clean." But Zodiac had altered the message. In crude handwriting, he scrawled, "Why can't you stop me? I can't stop killing." The card was grotesquely playful, a childlike taunt mixed with a killer's confession. Investigators couldn't help but feel that Zodiac was enjoying the absurdity of using a detergent ad to talk about murder. It was as if he were laughing at the very concept of law enforcement. The Melvin Belli connection. Months earlier, in December 1969, Zodiac had written directly to Melvin Belli, a flamboyant San Francisco attorney famous for representing high-profile clients. In that letter, Zodiac claimed he was desperate, that he feared losing control of his urges to kill. He begged Belli for help, writing, "Please help me. I cannot remain in control much longer." Unlike his usual mocking tone, this letter was strangely vulnerable, almost pleading. But many investigators doubted its sincerity. They believed it was yet another manipulation, a way to confuse the public and paint himself as more human than he truly was. After the letter, Belli received phone calls at his home from someone claiming to be the Zodiac. The man wept, begged for help, and spoke of headaches and compulsion. But later analysis suggested these calls may have been hoaxes. Still, the belly letter stood out in the Zodiac's timeline, a moment when he appeared to lower his mask, if only briefly. A killer's pattern. Between the detergent postcard, the belly plea, and the constant threats of bombs and murders, investigators were struggling to identify a clear pattern. What was genuine, and what was bluff? Was Zodiac truly spiraling into desperation? Or was he playing the part of a deranged villain, writing whatever he thought would cause the greatest fear? One thing was certain: his communications were working. Every new card, every letter, every postcard kept him in the headlines. He was shaping his own legend. The public didn't see him as just a criminal anymore. He was a phantom, a ghost story made real. On October 27, 1970, the Zodiac sent one of his most haunting communications to date, the infamous Halloween card. The envelope was addressed to Paul Avery, the San Francisco Chronicle reporter who had been covering the case more aggressively than anyone else. When Avery opened it, he found a strange, eerie card decorated with skeletons, pumpkins, and cartoonish graveyard imagery. At first glance, it looked almost harmless, a typical Halloween greeting. But Zodiac had carefully altered it. Across the front, he scrawled, "From your secret pal." Inside, next to a skeleton holding a pumpkin, Zodiac wrote in his jagged handwriting, "Peekaboo, you are doomed." The word doomed was written in bold letters, leaving no doubt about the threat. Even stranger, he had pasted cut-out words and phrases from newspapers to emphasize the message, a collage style reminiscent of ransom notes in crime films. But perhaps the most chilling detail was found in the small, hidden messages he left around the edges. In one corner, a strange cipher-like symbol appeared, and in another the phrase "by fire, by gun, by rope, by knife." These words echoed the methods of killing he had bragged about in earlier letters. Impact on Paul Avery. The card hit its mark. For the first time, the Zodiac singled out an individual. Not just the police or the public, but a specific person. Paul Avery, known for his bold reporting, was shaken. The Chronicle even provided him with extra security. Colleagues wore buttons reading, "I am not Paul Avery," in grim humor, but the threat was real. For Avery, this was no longer just a story. It was personal. Theatrical villainy. The Halloween card cemented what many already suspected. Zodiac wasn't just a killer, he was a performer. He blended horror, mockery, and theatrics into everything he did. By choosing a holiday associated with costumes and masks, he reinforced his own persona, a faceless phantom haunting California. And just like Halloween night itself, his presence lingered as a shadow, never fully seen, never fully understood. By early 1971, the Zodiac's communications began to slow compared to the frantic barrage of 1969 and 1970. But when he did reach out, his words carried the same mocking tone and cryptic hints. The Los Angeles Times letter. On March 13, 1971, the Los Angeles Times received a letter from Zodiac. In it, he complained that the Bay Area press was not giving him enough front-page attention anymore. He wrote, "I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones." This line shocked investigators. For the first time, Zodiac directly hinted at a possible connection to the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California. Until then, the Bates case had been local lore, a young woman murdered near Riverside City College, with taunting letters following her death. Could Zodiac have been involved? Or was he simply taking credit for another crime to inflate his legend? The ambiguity was his weapon, the Monticello card. A few months later, on July 13, 1971, another card arrived, this one mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle. It referenced a woman named Donna Lass, a nurse who had vanished from South Lake Tahoe in September 1970. The card featured pasted letters cut from magazines and included the phrase, "Sought victim 12." It also referenced Monticello, a cemetery located in the Sierra foothills, eerily close to where Lass had lived before her disappearance. The implication was clear. Zodiac was claiming her as another victim. But just as with other cases, the evidence was murky. Police could not connect him definitively to Lass's disappearance. Yet the way he hinted at burial grounds and victims' resting places kept investigators guessing. A growing pattern. By mid-1971, one thing was clear. The Zodiac was expanding beyond murder. He was weaving together a mythos, pulling in unsolved cases, hinting at hidden victims, and ensuring his shadow stretched far beyond what could be proven. Every letter, every card blurred the line between reality and theater, a performance where Zodiac was always the star. By the mid-1970s, the Zodiac had grown quieter. Years had passed since his known murders, and law enforcement wondered if he had finally disappeared, perhaps dead, imprisoned, or simply done with his game. But in 1974, the killer's voice returned, though in a different tone than before. The Exorcist Letter. On January 29, 1974, the San Francisco Chronicle received what would become one of the Zodiac's most bizarre communications: The Exorcist Letter. It began by calling William Friedkin's hit horror film The Exorcist, then dominating theaters, the best satirical sick comedy that I have ever seen. The letter included quotes from Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado, a satirical opera he had referenced before. Then it ended with a chilling line: Me 37 SFPD 0. If his tally was to be believed, the Zodiac was now claiming 37 victims. Whether true or not, the effect was undeniable. The media seized on the claim, reigniting public fear. The Citizen Letter. Just weeks later, another message arrived. This one, postmarked May 8, 1974, is often referred to as the Citizen Letter. In it, the writer praised the newspaper columnist Herb Can for his work, then shifted tone. Why don't you show some concern for public sensibilities and cut the advertisements for the movie Badlands? It was a strange, moralizing complaint, focused not on killing, but on media content. The question loomed: was this really the Zodiac? Or had imitators begun hijacking his persona? The Badlands card. On July 8, 1974, another note appeared, known as the Badlands card. It consisted of a simple postcard referencing Terrence Malick's film Badlands, which dramatized a 1950s killing spree. The card bore the phrase, "A citizen." Unlike his earlier letters, there was no cipher, no symbol, and no direct threats. A fading voice. By late 1974, many in law enforcement began to wonder. Had the Zodiac Killer truly written these? The style had shifted. The bravado was thinner. Some believed the letters were authentic, but showed a killer losing his grip on the spotlight. Others dismissed them as the work of hoaxers riding the Zodiac's fame. Either way, by the end of 1974, the once deafening presence of the Zodiac in California's headlines was fading into silence. The murders had stopped. The letters trickled out. The myth, however, was only growing larger. After the flurry of letters in 1974, the Zodiac seemed to vanish. For the first time since 1968, no confirmed murders, no phone calls, no cryptic ciphers. A vanishing phantom. The sudden silence baffled investigators. Had the killer been arrested on unrelated charges? Had he died? Or was he still alive, simply watching the fear he created echo through time? Despite the lack of fresh evidence, detectives and journalists kept digging. Every unexplained homicide, every strange letter to a newspaper, every anonymous phone call was measured against the Zodiac's shadow. Suspects old and new. Throughout the late 1970s, police revisited the names that had haunted them for years. Arthur Lee Allen, the Vallejo schoolteacher whose history and behavior drew constant suspicion, remained at the top of many lists. Yet no definitive evidence tied him to the crimes. Other names surfaced: drifters, loners, and men with criminal pasts, but the trail always ran cold. As years turned into a decade, the Zodiac became as much a cultural figure as a criminal one. He appeared in crime magazines, conspiracy circles, and even inspired fictional killers in novels and films. The 1980s, cold case status. By the 1980s, law enforcement had largely admitted the investigation had gone cold. The San Francisco Police Department officially downgraded the case, saying resources were better directed at active crimes. The Zodiac Task Force dissolved, though individual detectives never stopped working the file on their own time. But even as the official pursuit slowed, public fascination only grew. Every new true crime program or book seemed to add layers of mystery. For a younger generation, the Zodiac was less a living threat and more an unsolved legend. The lingering threat. Some detectives feared the killer might have continued his crimes in silence, murdering far from the Bay Area, leaving behind victims never connected to his name. Others believed the Zodiac relished attention too much to stop so suddenly. Either way, the quiet years deepened his myth. A killer who could appear without warning and disappear just as suddenly seemed less like a man, and more like a ghost haunting California. The 1990s brought something new to the Zodiac investigation: science. For decades, detectives had relied on witness statements, handwriting, and fingerprints. Now, advances in DNA profiling offered the possibility of finally unmasking the killer. Forensics meets the Zodiac. Evidence long stored in police archives, envelopes, stamps, scraps of Paul Stine's bloody shirt, was sent to laboratories. Technicians carefully extracted material, searching for even the smallest biological trace. But the Zodiac had been cautious. Many of his letters were sealed with tape instead of saliva. Some samples yielded DNA, but they were often partial, degraded, or inconclusive. It was enough to eliminate suspects, but not enough to reveal a name. Renewed public fascination. The 1990s also saw a surge of true crime media. New books and documentaries revisited the case, reigniting public obsession. Robert Graysmith's books, based on his own investigation as a San Francisco Chronicle cartoonist, captured worldwide attention. The Zodiac story spread online, where early internet forums allowed amateur sleuths to pore over letters, ciphers, and theories in endless detail. Suspects revisited. As DNA became the gold standard of criminal investigation, old suspects were re-examined. Arthur Lee Allen, who had died in 1992, was among the first compared. His DNA did not match the Zodiac samples. Others, from fringe figures to credible leads, were also eliminated one by one. For some, this was vindication, proof that Allen and others were innocent. For others, it was maddening. If not Allen, then who? The 2000s, a case reopened. By the early 2000s, several police departments, including San Francisco and Vallejo, reopened aspects of the Zodiac case. Cold case detectives, armed with new forensic tools, revisited crime scenes, letters, and stored evidence. At the same time, Hollywood reignited interest. David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac brought the story to a new generation, framing the case as one of obsession and unanswered questions. Despite all the renewed attention, the Zodiac remained elusive. The DNA tests excluded suspects but failed to confirm anyone. The case remained officially unsolved, yet as present in public imagination as ever. By the 2010s, more than 4 decades had passed since the Zodiac Killer's last confirmed letter. Most of the detectives who had chased him in the 1960s and 70s had retired. Files yellowed in storage boxes. Evidence sat sealed in archives. Yet, the mystery refused to die. Instead, it evolved. The hunt for Zodiac found a new home, not in smoke-filled police precincts, but in the glowing screens of the internet. Online forums like zodiackiller.com and web sleuths became gathering grounds for thousands of amateur investigators. They studied grainy photos, compared handwriting samples, and posted elaborate theories. Some swore they had found the killer's identity. Others chased phantom suspects, convinced by coincidences that would later unravel. What united them was obsession. The same restless energy that had once driven police detectives, now democratized across the world. Anyone with an internet connection could pick apart the case. By the mid-2010s, technology transformed that obsession into new tools. High-resolution scans of the original Zodiac ciphers circulated widely, allowing computer algorithms and cryptography hobbyists to test solutions that would have taken weeks by hand. DNA technology, too, loomed large. In 2018, investigators cracked the Golden State Killer case using forensic genealogy, matching discarded DNA to relatives in online ancestry databases. That case sent shockwaves through cold case units across America. If such a notorious killer could be unmasked, then surely the Zodiac was next. Yet the roadblock remained, retrieving usable DNA from decades-old evidence. Rumors swirled that partial samples existed, from saliva on envelopes or the bloody cab scene of Paul Stine. Officials remained tight-lipped, fueling even more speculation online. But the most dramatic breakthrough came in late 2020. A small international team of codebreakers, David Orenchak, an American software developer, Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian computer programmer, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician, cracked one of Zodiac's most infamous puzzles, the 340 cipher, unsolved for over 50 years. The solution was chilling yet telling. Zodiac mocked authorities for failing to catch him, bragging about his supposed fearlessness of the gas chamber. Yet, once again, he revealed no name, no identity, only arrogance. The cipher's decryption electrified the media. News outlets around the world reported on the breakthrough. Suddenly, the Zodiac wasn't just a ghost of the 1960s. He was back in headlines, back in the public imagination, his voice echoing across half a century. For modern investigators, it was a bittersweet moment. Technology had finally cracked a wall that once seemed impenetrable. But the solution also underscored the Zodiac's cruel genius. He could taunt endlessly, while leaving nothing that could truly unmask him. Meanwhile, online sleuths multiplied. Some focused on handwriting, others on geographic profiling, using software to predict where Zodiac might have lived based on crime scene patterns. Others dove deep into digitized newspaper archives, hunting for forgotten clues. The internet gave the Zodiac case immortality. Unlike other unsolved murders which fade with time, Zodiac's story was constantly reborn for new generations, each bringing fresh tools and fresh obsession. By the late 2010s and into the 2020s, the hunt had become a strange hybrid, half digital archaeology, half modern crime science. The Zodiac existed in memes, YouTube documentaries, Reddit theories, and true crime podcasts. For many, he was less a single killer than a shared puzzle, an endless labyrinth of clues. And yet, the same haunting truth lingered. After all the theories, after all the advances, the Zodiac's real name was still locked away, somewhere between fragile evidence boxes and fading memories. Even in the digital age, he remained what he had always been, a phantom who thrived in the shadows. By the early 2020s, the Zodiac case had entered a strange new phase. No longer confined to dusty police archives or niche forums, it became fuel for headlines once again, this time driven by a new group of investigators. In October 2021, a team known as the Case Breakers, made up of retired law enforcement officers, journalists, and military intelligence specialists, stepped forward with a bold claim. They had identified the Zodiac Killer. Their suspect was Gary Poste, a house painter and Air Force veteran who had lived in California and died in 2018. The Case Breakers presented an array of circumstantial evidence. They pointed to scars on Poste's forehead, claiming they matched composite sketches of the Zodiac. They highlighted alleged hidden messages in the Zodiac's ciphers that could be interpreted as his name. And they linked him to a 1966 murder in Riverside, suggesting it was an early Zodiac crime. The media exploded. For days, headlines screamed that the Zodiac had finally been unmasked. Poste's name and face circulated across social platforms, his story dissected and debated. But soon, skepticism flooded in. The FBI and the San Francisco Police Department publicly stated that the case remained open and that Poste was not considered a confirmed suspect. Critics noted that the evidence presented by the Case Breakers was circumstantial, speculative, and at times inconsistent. Many pointed out that the Riverside police had long rejected the Zodiac link to the 1966 case. Online communities tore the claims apart, analyzing each piece of evidence, exposing contradictions, and accusing the group of seeking publicity. For every believer convinced that Poste fit the profile, there were dozens who dismissed the theory as wishful thinking. Still, the controversy reignited public fascination. Poste's name became the centerpiece of documentaries, podcasts, and heated internet debates. For some, the possibility was tantalizing. After decades of shadows, perhaps the killer had been hiding in plain sight all along. For others, it was yet another false dawn in a case defined by them. What the episode revealed most was the enduring power of the Zodiac story. Even half a century later, the mere suggestion of a solution could dominate headlines worldwide. And as investigators, both official and amateur, continued to argue over Poste's relevance, one chilling fact remained unchanged. The Zodiac's crimes were still technically unsolved. His identity still unproven. His shadow still unbroken. In the end, whether Gary Poste was the Zodiac or just another name in a long line of suspects, the legend lived on, untouchable, elusive, and eternal. The case had outlasted its era, its detectives, and even its supposed suspects. And in the digital age, it became something more than a murder mystery. It became a story that refused to die. The Zodiac Killer, who once promised in his ciphers that he would live on in the afterlife as a collection of slaves, had achieved a far more terrifying immortality, as a puzzle that may never be solved, haunting generation after generation. And so, more than half a century after the Zodiac's first attack, we are left with fragments, letters, ciphers, witness accounts, suspects who came and went. His shadow lingers across decades of fear, obsession, and unanswered questions. But is the case truly unsolvable? Or is the answer hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone, maybe in our time, to finally piece it all together? In the next episode, we follow new leads, fresh theories, and the relentless pursuit of truth that refuses to let the Zodiac rest. Could the identity of one of history's most notorious killers still be cracked wide open? You won't want to miss what comes next. If you've been gripped by this journey through the Zodiac's reign of terror and the hunt that followed, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who love true crime mysteries. Your support keeps this investigation alive, and together, we'll keep searching for answers.